Do not obey her. The command carried across Silver Oath Field just as Alara stepped onto the stone platform overlooking more than 10,000 royal wolves. Hundreds of faces turned toward her. Then thousands. Winter wind pulled at her dark cloak, carrying the low murmur of confused commanders across a field that stretched almost half a mile toward the pine-covered hills. Alara did not speak. She could not. She did not reach for the royal signet beneath her cloak or ask Rowan to announce her bloodline. She simply lifted one hand. The commander nearest the platform froze. Across the first formation, soldiers stopped moving. A second line followed. Then a third. The change traveled outward like a silent tide until banners settled, conversations died, and more than 10,000 royal wolves stood completely still. One officer stared at Alara as if the impossible had just taken human form. She has never commanded an army. Elias Ward stood several feet behind her, his weathered face unreadable. No, he said quietly. That is why you should ask yourself why they listened. Alara lowered her hand. A day and a half earlier, Alara had wanted nothing from an army. She had been sitting inside a small chamber at the Hall of Asterwin, while 3 northern delegations argued outside about what her existence meant. The fire beside her had burned low. Mara's silver pendant rested on the table beside the royal signet that had helped restore a name someone had tried to erase. Rowan entered carrying another stack of sealed letters. Alara looked at them and signed. More? 7 since sunrise. He placed them beside the others. 2 territorial councils want formal confirmation of your identity. 1 noble house wants an audience. 3 former Valerith districts want to know whether you intend to claim authority over them. Alara stared at the growing pile. Yesterday, people had questioned whether she belonged in the hall. Today, strangers wanted to know what she planned to rule. Neither reaction felt like truth. Her hands moved. And the 7th? Rowan hesitated. That one came from Silver Oath Command. Alara straightened. Rowan broke the seal and read silently before looking at her. Former Valerith Royal Wolf units have begun gathering at the old Oath Field. How many? The first count was more than 6,000. Alara's expression changed. Rowan continued. More are arriving from the northern districts. She signed. Who summoned them? No one we can identify. Elias entered before Rowan could say more, carrying a weathered military ledger from the sealed archive. That is not entirely true. He placed it on the table and opened a page marked with Mara's 7-branched crest. They were summoned by a protocol written more than 20 years ago. Alara looked at him. By my mother? In part. Elias pointed to a faded line. When a surviving Valerith heir is formally recognized, dormant royal wolf companies are ordered to assemble until legitimate command authority is established. Alara's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. I never asked them to come. I know. Elias looked toward the snow beyond the window. But someone else knew they would. The anonymous warning from Asterwin returned to Alara's mind. Someone had anticipated her arrival before her identity was proven. Now thousands of soldiers were gathering because of a protocol she had never known existed. Rowan quietly unfolded another message. There is more. Alara looked at him. Nightfang has received word of the gathering. For one heartbeat, she thought of Kale. Then Rowan finished. And someone is already telling the northern commanders that the Alpha King intends to stop you from taking control of your army. Alara slowly rose. It was not her army. But somewhere in the shadows, someone desperately wanted the world to believe it was. Alara did not touch the letters again. She crossed to the tall window and looked north, where the mountains disappeared beneath a pale winter sky. Somewhere beyond those ridges, thousands of royal wolves were gathering under a law written before she was old enough to remember her mother's face clearly. Behind her, Elias turned another page of the military ledger. The protocol was designed for a succession emergency, he said. If House Valerith lost its recognized command structure, surviving royal wolf companies were required to assemble at Silver Oath Field and wait. Alara turned. Wait for whom? Rowan translated her signs. Elias hesitated. That is what concerns me. The final authority clause is missing. He showed them the page. A narrow section had been removed with the same careful precision Alara had seen in her birth record. Her name had once been cut from history. Now part of the law governing thousands of soldiers had disappeared too. Alara signed. Could someone command them without that clause? Not lawfully, Elias answered. But frightened people do not always wait for lawful answers. A knock sounded at the chamber door. Captain Soren entered with 2 sealed messages. The delegations are asking for a formal audience. Alera's expression tightened. They know about the gathering, Rowan said after reading her hands. Soren nodded. Everyone knows now. The first delegation entered minutes later. 3 northern representatives bowed, but Alera noticed how quickly their eyes moved toward Mara's signet. Lord Brenner, an older landholder from the western valleys, spoke first. Your Highness, the northern districts need certainty. If you intend to restore Valerith authority, we should know before others decide your future for you. Alera signed. I have not claimed a throne. Rowan translated. Brenner glanced toward the others. You may not need to. 10,000 soldiers gathering beneath your family's oath will look like a claim whether you make one or not. The words settled heavily. Another representative stepped forward. Then claim them before someone else does. Alera looked at him. He continued, you have the bloodline. You have the guard's recognition. With the Royal Wolves behind you, no council could dismiss you again. Once, that promise might have sounded like justice. After years of being treated as less than everyone around her, she could understand why power might feel like an answer. But she remembered Mara's letter. She remembered Kale learning that protection without choice could become another kind of cage. Alera's hands moved slowly. If 10,000 people must obey me before you believe I deserve respect, then you still do not understand why you were wrong. Rowan's voice softened as he translated. No one answered. Alera continued. I will not claim a crown while someone is using my mother's secrets to move people like pieces on a board. Brenner studied her. Then what will you claim? The question surprised her. Alera looked at the pendant resting against her chest. The truth. Soren lowered his gaze, almost hiding his approval. After the delegation left, Elias opened the military ledger again. There is another reason we cannot ignore Silver Oath Field. He pointed to a faded symbol beside the assembly protocol. Alera recognized it immediately. The hollow circle. Rowan leaned closer. Why would their mark be attached to a royal wolf order? Elias looked troubled. Because the circle once authenticated emergency commands for House Valerith. Alera felt the pieces shifting into place. The same organization that had helped erase her family had once possessed access to the system, now gathering an army around her name. She signed, we go to the field. Rowan nodded. Elias closed the ledger. To take command? Alera met his eyes. No. Her hands moved again. To make certain nobody else already has. They found Mara's final military rule in a place no commander would have thought to search. Elias had taken Alera and Rowan beneath the Hall of Asterwin, into a narrow records chamber reserved for laws written during royal emergencies. Dust covered the shelves, but the oldest ledgers remained sealed behind cedar panels. Elias carried the military ledger from upstairs and compared its damaged page with an index carved into the back of one cabinet. The missing clause was copied somewhere else, he said. Rowan leaned closer. Why keep a second copy? Because Mara trusted systems more than individuals. Elias pressed 2 small brass markers hidden along the cabinet frame. A compartment opened, revealing a thin leather volume wrapped in faded blue cloth. Alera recognized her mother's 7-branched crest before Elias placed the book on the table. He opened it carefully. The first pages described emergency command procedures for the Royal Wolves. No single general could take permanent control during a disputed succession. No council could redirect the army without independent authentication. Even a surviving royal heir could not simply appear and demand obedience. Alera felt something inside her loosen. Mara had not built a system to make rulers stronger. She had built one to make power harder to steal. Elias turned another page. Here, the missing clause had survived. If the recognized command structure became compromised, all assembled royal wolves were to suspend movement until the keeper of the oath confirmed legitimate authority. Rowan looked at Elias. Who was the keeper? Elias did not answer immediately. His eyes remained on the old writing. Princess Mara. Alera stared at him. My mother commanded them. Not in the way you mean. Elias shook his head. The keeper existed to stop unlawful commands, not issue ordinary ones. Mara could halt the royal wolves during a succession crisis until the evidence was examined. Rowan glanced at Alera, and after Mara disappeared, Elias turned the page. A second provision appeared beneath the first. If the keeper could no longer serve, authority could pass to a surviving heir after formal recognition by members of the old royal guard. Alera's breath slowed. She had already been recognized. Elias seemed to read the thought in her expression. That does not make 10,000 soldiers yours. Alera signed, good. For the first time that morning, Elias almost smiled. Then his expression became serious again. It gives you one emergency authority until a lawful command structure is restored. What authority? Elias raised one hand, palm outward. Halt. Alera looked at the gesture. It was almost painfully simple. No advance. No redeployment. No new allegiance, Elias explained. Once the keeper invokes the halt, every royal wolf under the old oath is required to remain in place until the disputed command is authenticated. Rowan exhaled softly. So whoever removed the clause from the main ledger removed the one rule capable of stopping the army. Elias nodded. Which means someone may have expected this day. Alera looked again at Mara's handwriting. Her mother had left no command to conquer, punish, or reclaim. She had preserved one final power for her daughter, the power to stop others from moving too quickly. A knock came from the stairway. Captain Soren entered holding a fresh dispatch. Snow had melted across his shoulders. The count at Silver Oath Field has passed 8,000. More companies are arriving from the east. Rowan took the message and read further. His face tightened. Alera noticed immediately. What else? The commanders received instructions less than an hour ago. From whom? Rowan looked toward Elias before answering. The order carries Valerith authentication. Alera's eyes dropped to Mara's book. Elias went completely still. What does it tell them to do? Rowan read the final line again. Prepare to march south at first light. Alera did not need to ask what lay south of Silver Oath Field. Nightfang did. By the time the message reached Nightfang, Kale had already heard 3 different versions of the same rumor. In one, Alera had claimed the Valerith throne. In another, she had summoned thousands of royal wolves to march south. The third was worse because it sounded almost reasonable. The newly recognized heir was gathering enough authority to force Nightfang to answer her. Kale stood at the head of the council table, while Chancellor Hale's empty chair remained under guard at the far end of the chamber. Aldrin placed a northern dispatch before him. Confirmed count is above 8,000. More units are arriving. One councilman leaned forward. Then we cannot wait. Move our border companies north before the roads close. Kale did not look at him. For what purpose? Deterrence. Against whom? The man hesitated. The Valerith heir. Kale's gaze sharpened. Her name is Alera. Silence followed. Garrick opened another report. There is something else. Northern commanders received an authenticated order to prepare for movement south at first light. That changed the room. Several council members began speaking at once. Kale raised one hand, and the chamber quieted. Did Alera issue it? We cannot confirm that, Garrick said. Then we do not call it her order. Another councilman frowned. Your Majesty, 10,000 soldiers do not gather by accident. Neither do 20-year-old authorization codes appear by accident, Kale replied. Aldrin understood immediately. 6 months before Alera's banishment, one of Hale's private clerks had searched Valerith records using a code older than Hale's office. Now a military order carrying Valerith authentication had appeared just as Alera's identity became public. Kale moved toward the map. Silver Oath Field lay north of Asterwin, with Nightfang beyond the southern roads. If the Royal Wolves marched, every frightened official between the two territories would interpret movement before asking why. Fear would do the rest. Someone wants us looking north, Kale said. Aldrin followed his gaze. Instead of looking inside Nightfang, Kale nodded. Tessa sat near the guarded doors, still under protection after giving evidence against the hollow circle. She spoke carefully. They planned around reactions. That was how they worked. They rarely needed people to know the whole plan. They only needed each person to do the predictable thing. Kale looked at her. And what would they predict I will do? Protect your kingdom. By sending soldiers north. Tessa nodded. Which would make Alera's commanders believe the rumor that you intend to stop her. The trap became painfully clear. Two forces did not need to hate each other if someone could make both believe the other was moving first. Kale turned to Garrick. No northern deployment. A councilman rose. Your Majesty, if those royal wolves cross south before we are prepared, then we respond to what they actually do, not what someone wants us to fear they might do. That is an extraordinary risk. Kale looked at the reports again. So is starting a crisis because an anonymous order told us to be afraid. He instructed Garrick to strengthen communication posts along the northern roads, not military positions. Riders would carry written verification requests to Asterwin. Civilian routes would remain open. No Nightfang unit would advance without direct confirmation. Aldrin waited until the council dispersed before speaking. You are trusting her. Kale looked toward the northern windows. I am trusting what she has already shown me. Alara had been given every reason to hate the people who dismissed her, yet she had chosen evidence over revenge. Royal blood would not suddenly erase that woman. A messenger entered moments later carrying a second dispatch. Garrick broke the seal and read it twice. The Northern Order has been updated. Kale turned. Updated how? Garrick's expression hardened. It now claims the march was authorized directly by the surviving Valerith heir. Aldrin went still. Kale did not. He looked at the map and finally understood what the enemy needed. Not an army. Not even a battle. They needed Alara's name attached to the first move. Send this to Asterwin, he said. Tell her someone is trying to make me believe she gave an order. He paused. And tell her I do not. Silver Oath Field appeared beyond the ridge shortly after noon, and Alara understood at once why frightened people had begun calling it an army. Royal wolves filled the broad winter plain in ordered formations, their dark cloaks broken by hundreds of silver banners moving beneath the wind. More riders were still arriving along the eastern road. Alara slowed her horse. She had expected thousands. Seeing them was different. These were not symbols in Mara's ledger. They were people who had left homes, families, workshops, farms, and distant posts because an old protocol had awakened after more than 20 years. Rowan rode beside her. The latest count is 9,400 and rising. Alara looked across the field and signed, I did not bring them here. I know, but the soldiers did not. As Alara entered the camp with Elias and Captain Soren, conversations faded around them. Some royal wolves lowered their heads respectfully. Others simply watched. A few looked openly uncertain. Alara could almost feel the question following her through the formations. What would the surviving Valerith heir ask them to do? Near the center of the field, 6 senior commanders waited beside a long wooden table covered with maps and sealed orders. Commander Theron Voss, a broad-shouldered man with gray at his temples, stepped forward. Your Highness. Alara acknowledged him with a small nod. Voss gestured toward the table. We need your confirmation before first light. Alara's hands moved. Confirmation of what? Rowan translated. Voss looked surprised. The Southern Movement Order. Elias immediately stepped closer. She issued no such order. The commanders exchanged uneasy looks. One of them opened a document and placed it before Alara. Mara's 7-branch crest appeared at the top. Beneath it sat an authentication mark matching the old royal intelligence system. At the bottom were words Alara had never written, authorizing the assembled royal wolves to move south toward the Nightfang boundary. She felt no anger at first, only clarity. Someone had borrowed her identity before she had even learned how much authority it carried. Voss studied her. The order passed 2 verification stations. Elias examined the mark. Those stations were built to recognize the old code. They cannot know who entered it. Another commander folded his arms. Then someone has access to Valerith authentication. We already knew that, Rowan said quietly. Alara looked across the field. Nearly 10,000 people were waiting for certainty, and uncertainty was exactly what the enemy had given them. Her hands moved. I did not come here to make 10,000 people obey me. Rowan translated, and several commanders looked at one another. Alara continued. I came because someone is trying to make you obey a lie. Voss's expression changed. Before he could answer, a rider approached carrying a Nightfang dispatch bearing Kale's royal seal. Soren opened it and handed it to Rowan. Alara watched his eyes move across the message. What does he say? Rowan looked at her. Someone is trying to make me believe you gave an order. I do not. Alara closed her eyes for one brief second. Kale had seen the trap from the other side. Voss looked toward the southern road. If Nightfang is not mobilizing, then why were we ordered south? Elias answered before Alara could sign. Because someone needs both kingdoms to believe the other moved first. A bell sounded from the eastern command post. One of the officers turned sharply. Another company has arrived. A clerk hurried toward the table carrying a fresh count. 10,000 and 12 present. The number settled over them. 10,000 royal wolves. One false order. One road leading south. Then another messenger appeared from the far command station, breathing hard from the ride. Commander Voss, the departure schedule has been advanced. Voss frowned. By whose authority? The messenger handed him a sealed instruction. Voss read it, and the color left his face. By hers. He turned the page toward Alara. Beneath the forged order was a second command carrying her royal authentication. The first formations were instructed to begin moving within the hour. Commander Voss read the new instruction twice before laying it beside the first. The seal looked correct. The authentication sequence looked correct. Even the timing matched the emergency protocol. Only one thing was wrong. Alara had never given the order. Elias bent over the document while Rowan remained beside her. This code was generated after we left Asterwin, Elias said. Voss frowned. Then whoever issued it still has access to the old system. Alara studied the page. The first order had told the Royal Wolves to prepare for movement at first light. The second had moved departure forward to within the hour. Someone was accelerating the crisis. Her hands moved. Why the hurry? Rowan translated. No one answered immediately. Then Voss looked toward the southern road. Because Nightfang has not responded the way they expected. Alara understood. Kale had refused to send soldiers north. Whoever designed the trap now needed the Royal Wolves to move first. A younger commander pointed to the authentication line. The order names the surviving Valerith heir as direct authority. Until we prove it false, some companies will consider it binding. Elias shook his head. Not under Mara's final protocol. Most commanders have never seen that protocol, Voss replied. The surviving copy has been sealed for more than 20 years. Alara looked across the field. Thousands of people could not hear the argument happening around one wooden table. To them, authenticated instructions had arrived through familiar channels. They would follow the system they had been trained to trust. Rowan lowered his voice. Then we show them the surviving rule. Elias opened Mara's leather volume. That will stop the senior commanders once they examine it. It will not stop units already receiving departure instructions through their command posts. A horn sounded in the distance, long and low. Voss turned. Along the eastern edge of the field, several formations began gathering their supplies and closing ranks for travel. Nothing about the movement was threatening. That made it more dangerous. It looked organized, lawful, routine. A lie wearing the shape of duty. Alara signed, send riders. Voss immediately called 2 officers forward. Carry a suspension notice to every command post. No company leaves until the disputed order is reviewed. The officers departed, but Elias did not relax. If the false authentication outranks Voss's local notice, some posts may reject it. Alara looked at Mara's book again. There was one authority the old system could not legally override. Halt. Before she could sign, Rowan noticed something near the bottom of the forged document. Wait. He turned the page toward Elias. This phrase. The order read, by blood restored, command returns. Elias's expression hardened. Mara would never have approved that wording. Voss looked at him. Why? Because the oath was designed specifically to prevent bloodline alone from controlling the Royal Wolves. Alara felt the deception become visible. Whoever forged the order understood Valerith codes, but not Mara's purpose. They knew the machinery. They did not understand the woman who built it. Another horn sounded, this time from the western formation. Then a third answered farther across the field. Messengers moved between command posts. Silver banners shifted as companies prepared to follow instructions they believed came from Alara. Voss looked toward her. Your Highness, invoke the Keeper's halt. Elias raised a hand. Not from here. The protocol requires public invocation before assembled command. Alara looked toward the stone platform near the center of the field, almost a quarter-mile away. Thousands of Royal Wolves stood between her and it. She signed, then we go there. Voss hesitated. If the formations begin moving before we reach it, local commanders may believe you are confirming the march. Alara met his eyes. Then they need to see me stop it. She started toward the platform with Rowan, Elias, and Voss beside her. As they crossed the field, the first ranks began turning toward the southern road. Alara did not quicken her pace. Panic was what someone else wanted. When she reached the steps, Elias spoke quietly behind her. Once you invoke the halt, every Royal Wolf under the old oath will have to choose whether the oath still means something. Alara looked over 10,000 waiting faces and raised her hand. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Alara stood on the stone platform with her right hand raised, palm facing the field, while winter wind moved through 10,000 silver banners below. Then Elias stepped forward behind her and placed one hand over the old crest on his coat. "Keeper's halt," he said. Commander Voss turned toward the nearest formation and repeated the words. The first senior officer stopped. Then the commander beside him did the same. Across the field, a royal wolf lowered the travel banner he had been preparing to carry south. Another followed. The response moved from formation to formation, not with the speed of fear, but with the certainty of something remembered. Horns fell silent. Horses were held in place. Supply teams stopped loading wagons. Within moments, the enormous field became still. Alara kept her hand raised until even the distant eastern companies had stopped preparing to leave. More than 10,000 royal wolves were waiting. Not because she had demanded their loyalty, because Mara had built a law strong enough to survive the people who tried to erase it. Rowan stood beside Alara, ready to translate. She lowered her hand and signed 3 words. "No one marches." Rowan's voice carried from the platform. Commander Voss repeated the order to the command posts, and signal officers relayed it across the field. No one moved toward the southern road. A commander near the front stepped forward. "Your Highness, the authenticated order carries your authority. If you deny it publicly, we need to know what replaces it." Alara looked across the formations. Her hands moved again. "Nothing replaces it until the truth does." Rowan translated. A murmur passed through the nearest ranks. Alara continued. "Protect the roads. Protect the people. Remain here until every order is verified." Voss nodded and turned to his officers. "You heard the keeper." Another commander approached the platform, uncertainty plain on his face. "And if Nightfang advances while we wait?" Alara looked toward the southern horizon. She remembered Kale's message. "Someone is trying to make me believe you gave an order." "I do not." Her answer came without hesitation. "Nightfang is not advancing." The commander frowned. "How can you know?" Alara signed. "Because the Alpha King chose evidence before fear." Rowan translated the sentence exactly. Elias watched her with quiet understanding. Alara was not asking 10,000 soldiers to trust Kale because she cared about him. She was asking them to judge what he had actually done. No Nightfang companies had moved north. No border roads had been closed. No ultimatum had arrived. Only rumors had moved quickly. Voss lifted the forged document. "Then this is what almost sent us south." Alara shook her head and signed again. "No. Fear almost sent us south." The document only gave fear a direction. The field became quiet once more. An officer hurried toward Voss from the Western Command Station carrying a packet of verification records. "Commander, we traced the second order through 3 relay posts." Voss opened the packet. "Where did it originate?" The officer looked toward Alara before answering. "Asterwin." Rowan went still. Elias stepped down from the platform. "That is impossible. We left Asterwin before the order was generated." "The relay record is clear," the officer said. "It entered the command system through a restricted Royal Archive relay." Alara felt the cold settle deeper than the winter air. Someone had not merely stolen an old Valerith code. Someone had used the hall she had trusted only hours after she left it. Voss looked across the silent formations. "What are your orders, Your Highness?" More than 10,000 royal wolves waited for her answer. Alara looked at the forged command, then at Mara's pendant beneath her cloak. For most of her life, others had decided what her silence meant. Weakness, obedience, emptiness. Now an entire field waited for her hands. She raised one finger and signed to Rowan. "One order." Rowan faced the commanders. "No one leaves this field until we know who is speaking in her name." The order spread across Silver Oath Field before the winter sun reached the western ridge. No company departed. No banner turned south. Instead, Commander Voss divided the royal wolves into quiet defensive assignments around the field, nearby roads, supply stations, and civilian routes. Alara had refused to use 10,000 soldiers to strengthen her claim, and that refusal seemed to unsettle some commanders more than any demand for loyalty would have. Inside the command pavilion, Elias placed the relay records beside Mara's military ledger. "The forged instruction entered Asterwin's command relay 17 minutes after we left the hall," he said. Rowan studied the timing. "Then whoever sent it either watched us leave or knew our schedule." Alara signed. "Could the archivist have issued it?" Elias shook his head. "Not through the relay identified here." That station belongs to the restricted Royal Archive corridor. Alara remembered the cedar door, the 3 keys, and the records revealing that the hollow circle had once served House Valerith. Too many locked doors had opened since she arrived. Perhaps one had never truly been locked. Voss entered carrying reports from the field. All companies have acknowledged the halt. Civilian roads remain open. Supply teams are staying in place. He paused. Several commanders are asking whether they should swear direct allegiance to you while the old command structure is disputed. Alara answered immediately. No. Rowan translated. Voss looked surprised. Alara continued. Their oath is not mine to collect. It belongs to the duty they accepted. Elias's eyes softened. Mara had written rules to prevent a frightened kingdom from becoming the property of one person. Alara would not destroy that protection simply because she happened to be the person everyone was willing to follow. She signed again. Protect the roads. Protect the families traveling through them. Protect the records until we know who altered the system. Nothing more. Voss bowed his head. Understood. Nearly 60 miles south, Kale received the first verified report before sunset. Aldrin stood beside the map while Garrick read aloud. The Royal Wolves have halted. No formations are moving toward Nightfang. The surviving Valerith heir has ordered the field secured and all civilian routes kept open. Kale said nothing for several seconds. The council had spent the morning warning him what Alara might do with an army. Now he knew what she had actually done with one. She had stopped it. Aldrin noticed the faint change in his expression. 10,000 soldiers waited for her command, and she told them to stay where they were. Kale looked toward the northern road marked on the map. That sounds like her. Garrick handed him another message. There is more. The false order was traced to Asterwin's restricted archive relay system. Kale's expression hardened. The same archive where they found the hollow circle records? Yes. Aldrin leaned over the table. Then whoever forged the order may have access to both the old Valerith command system and Asterwin's restricted archives. Kale remembered Elias's warning from the previous dispatch. The hollow circle had not entered House Valerith as an enemy. It had already possessed the keys. Now someone seemed to possess them again. Kale turned to Garrick. Compare the Asterwin relay mark with the authorization code used by Hale's clerk 6 months before Alara's banishment. Garrick left immediately. Back at Silver Oath Field, dusk settled over thousands of quiet campfires. Alara stood at the edge of the platform while Rowan approached with a message bearing Kale's seal. She opened it herself. The note contained only 2 sentences. Nightfang will not move north. I trust what you chose when you had every reason to choose power. Alara read the words twice. Then Elias appeared from the pavilion, holding the latest archive transmission. His face told her the peace would not last long. We found something. Alara turned. Elias placed the relay record in her hands. The false order was prepared before the Royal Guard formally recognized you at Asterwin. Alara stared at the date. Before anyone should have known she would inherit the Keeper's authority, someone had already been preparing to use it. The army had not been an unexpected opportunity. Someone had been waiting for her to receive it. The date on the relay record changed everything. Alara carried the document into the command pavilion, where Elias, Rowan, and Commander Voss gathered around the long wooden table. Outside, more than 10,000 Royal Wolves remained under the Keeper's halt, their campfires scattered across the darkening field like distant stars. Elias compared the relay date with the record of Alara's formal recognition. This was prepared 11 hours before the Royal Guard confirmed your identity, he said. Rowan looked at him. Then whoever created it already knew what the Hall would decide. Alara's hands moved. Or they knew what evidence we would find. No one answered. That possibility was worse. The anonymous warning had reached Asterwin before Alara arrived. The old military protocol had awakened after her recognition. Then a false order had appeared using authority she had barely learned she possessed. These were no longer separate events. Someone had anticipated each step. Voss unfolded a map of the Royal Archive relay system. The forged order entered through a restricted relay station, but the preparation record points somewhere else. He indicated a faded routing mark. Elias leaned closer. That authorization family is older than Asterwin's current system. Alara recognized the implication before Rowan spoke. The hollow circle. Elias nodded. Possibly, but we still do not accuse without proof. Alara appreciated that he remembered her rule. Evidence before suspicion. Truth before fear. A messenger entered carrying a secured transmission from Nightfang. Kale's investigators had completed their comparison. Garrick's report confirmed that the authorization mark attached to the forged Valerith order shared the same root sequence used by Chancellor Hale's clerk 6 months before Alara's banishment. Rowan read the final sentence aloud. Both records descend from a command credential created more than 20 years ago. Voss looked toward Elias. Corvin Valerith's system? Perhaps, Elias said. But command of the old circle changed hands. We still do not know who received it. Alara looked through the pavilion opening toward the silent field. Someone had wanted those royal wolves moving south. Someone had wanted Kale frightened enough to move north. The plan did not require either ruler to be cruel. It only required both to be afraid. Her hands moved slowly. They wanted a crisis. Rowan translated. Elias shook his head. More than that. They wanted you blamed for beginning it. Alara understood then. If she had accepted the false order, Nightfang would have seen an emerging royal heir marching south with thousands behind her. If Kale had reacted first, northern commanders would have believed the Alpha King meant to suppress her. Either choice would have transformed uncertainty into division. Voss asked quietly, "What happens to the royal wolves now?" Alara looked at the soldiers beyond the pavilion. They had obeyed her halt, but obedience was not ownership. Her hands moved. "First, I released the keeper's halt." Rowan translated. Voss held her gaze for a moment, then bowed his head. "The halt is released." Only then did Alara give her next instruction. "Beginning at sunrise, every company may return to its district in scheduled groups unless needed to protect the investigation and civilian roads." Rowan translated. Voss blinked. "You are releasing them?" "They were never mine to keep." Elias lowered his eyes with something close to pride. Before midnight, the instruction traveled across the field. Relief replaced tension. Families would see their loved ones return. Roads would remain protected. No throne would gain an army simply because fear had assembled one. Far south, Kale read Alara's decision in silence. Aldrin stood across from him. She could have kept more than 10,000 royal wolves under her authority. Kale folded the report. That is why they obeyed her. Garrick entered with one final discovery. We traced the original credential creation date. Kale looked up. When Garrick placed the record on the table, 3 days before Princess Mara disappeared. The room went still. At Silver Oath Field, Elias received the same finding minutes later. Alara stared at the date until the cold seemed to disappear around her. 3 days before her mother vanished, someone had created the authority later used to erase records, manipulate Nightfang, and send a false command in Alara's name. She touched Mara's pendant. The enemy had not simply survived the fall of House Valerith. It had prepared for what came after. Rowan watched her hands rise. What were they waiting for? Elias looked toward the thousands of silver banners resting beneath the night sky. Maybe not what, he said quietly. Maybe who? Alara understood the answer before he finished. Someone had been waiting more than 20 years for the silent Omega to come home.